The story you are about to hear was carefully written with a unique science fiction approach, breaking classic patterns and offering a journey beyond familiar narratives. Connor liked the quiet hum of the archive because it never asked him questions. The vault of peripheral histories stretched around him in gentle curves of alloy and light, shelves rising like frozen waves, each holding artifacts that no longer mattered enough to be dangerous. He cataloged them anyway. Someone had to remember the things history had already decided to forget. He was 30, human, and thoroughly unremarkable by galactic standards, which suited him just fine. His greatest daily risk involved choosing between recaf with artificial cinnamon or artificial vanilla, a decision he usually regretted either way. The summons arrived without drama, which somehow made it worse. A soft pulse on his wrist implant, a priority seal bearing the sigil of the Velthiri crown, and a polite request that was definitely not optional. Connor checked it twice, hoping it was meant for a different Connor, perhaps a more heroic one with broader shoulders and fewer opinions about shelf organization. It wasn't. Princess Astrid of Velthiri requested his presence in the inner archive. Immediately, Connor sighed, saved his work, and told a ceramic idol from the Third Dust Rebellion that he'd be back soon, assuming neither of them were arrested. The inner archive was warmer, lit by bioluminescent panels that responded to motion and mood. Astrid stood near the central pedestal, her posture relaxed in a way that made Connor nervous. She looked human at first glance, unsettlingly so, until your eyes adjusted and noticed the long, elegant ears tapering back through her silver blonde hair. Velthiri features, he reminded himself. Perfectly normal. Perfectly alien. She smiled when she saw him. A real smile, not the ceremonial kind, which somehow felt more dangerous. "Archivist Connor," she said. "Thank you for coming so quickly." "I live for surprises," he replied. "Especially royal ones. They're statistically the most survivable." Astrid laughed, a sound that echoed softly against the archive walls, and gestured toward the pedestal. Resting there was a book that should not have existed. Thick, dark, its surface alive with faint circuitry that shifted like veins under skin. Connor felt a strange pressure behind his eyes as he approached, like the onset of a headache brought on by destiny, which he did not believe in and therefore resented on principle. "The Codex of Champions," Astrid said reverently. "It records those who shaped our history, warriors, tacticians, leaders. It updates itself." Connor frowned. Books that update themselves are usually full of advertisements or bad opinions. Astrid placed her hand on the cover. The codex reacted instantly, glyphs blooming across its surface, light spilling into the room. Connor took an involuntary step back. "That's new," he said. "It doesn't usually do that when I'm near things." "Actually," Astrid replied gently, "it has never done that for anyone." She opened the codex. The pages turned on their own, settling on a section etched with names Connor had seen before, carved into monuments, whispered in lectures. Legends. Astrid pointed to a line halfway down the page. Connor leaned in, squinting. Then he laughed. It burst out of him, loud and uncontrolled, bouncing off the walls like a minor emergency. "Oh, that's excellent," he said, wiping his eyes. "I was worried this would be serious." Astrid did not laugh. The name on the page was his. Every letter precise, every flourish unmistakable. Connor James Hale, rendered in the same script as warriors who had died centuries ago. His laughter faded into something thinner. "Okay," he said slowly. "That's less excellent." Astrid studied his face, searching for something he couldn't see. "You truly did not know." "Know what?" Connor asked. "That someone vandalized your sacred book with my name? Because I assure you, I've never vandalized anything sacred. I once returned a library book early." Astrid turned the page. Images flared to life, scenes of battle, fleets burning against violet skies, a figure at the center issuing commands with impossible calm. Connor's breath caught as the image shifted, showing a scar across the figure's shoulder. His shoulder burned suddenly, a phantom heat that made him gasp. "That's a coincidence," he said quickly. "A weird one, a statistically annoying one, but still." "You bear the same mark," Astrid said softly. In the same place. Connor swallowed. He had never liked that birthmark. Lots of people have shoulders. Astrid smiled again, sad this time. Commander Vareth vanished at the end of the Cataclysm War. Human and Velthiri, born of two worlds, my people believe certain souls return when they are needed. Connor closed the book with more force than necessary. The codex dimmed as if offended. I'm an archivist, he said. I file broken relics and argue with auto-indexers. I don't command fleets. I get nervous ordering food on unfamiliar planets. And yet, Astrid said, stepping closer, you reached for the codex exactly as Vareth once did. Connor looked at his hand. He had. He had not remembered deciding to. Humor bubbled up, thin but defiant. So what you're saying is, he said, I'm either a reincarnated war hero or your book has developed a very specific crush on me. Astrid met his gaze unflinching. What I am saying is that history has noticed you. Connor exhaled slowly. I preferred it when history ignored me. Outside the archive, distant alarms hummed to life, low and uncertain, like a thought the universe wasn't ready to finish. Connor didn't know it yet, but something ancient had just turned its attention back toward the present, and it had found him listed, neatly and irrevocably, among the legends. Connor slept badly, which was unfair, because he had done nothing to deserve it except exist near a prophetic book. His quarters were quiet, climate-balanced, and designed to lull occupants into calm neutrality. The ceiling simulated a Velthiri night sky, slow-moving constellations drifting like polite thoughts. None of it helped. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw light flaring across dark pages, heard Astrid's voice saying his name, with a seriousness that clung to him like static. When he did sleep, it came in fragments. Not dreams exactly. More like someone else's memories rifling through his head without permission. Metal corridors, the smell of ionized air. Voices shouting coordinates in a language he did not know but somehow understood. He woke with his heart racing, and the irritating certainty that if someone handed him a tactical map right now, he could probably tell them where to put their ships. This did not improve his mood. He arrived late to the archive the next day, which was another indignity. The archive noticed. Its systems hummed a little louder, lights brightening as if to say, "We expected better of you." Connor muttered an apology to no one in particular and tried to focus on his work. It was difficult to remain dedicated to cataloging ceremonial spoons when destiny was apparently circling overhead like a poorly piloted drone. Princess Astrid did not appear until mid-cycle. Connor sensed her before he saw her, the way one senses changes in gravity or temperature. She moved quietly, long ears angled back in a way he was starting to recognize as concern rather than formality. "You did not sleep," she said. "I did," Connor replied. "Just not at the same time as my body." She smiled, then tilted her head. "May I?" "Please don't open any books," he said. "I'm fragile today." They walked together through the outer stacks, past relics humming softly in containment fields. Astrid spoke of small things, restoration efforts, a council meeting that had lasted too long, an argument about whether ceremonial armor should be polished or allowed to age naturally. Connor found himself relaxing despite himself. It was easier when she spoke as Astrid rather than princess or prophet-bearer of inconvenient truths. They stopped near a training alcove, one of the archive's stranger features. It housed historical combat simulations for educational purposes. Connor frowned at it. "I don't remember that being active." "It was reauthorized this morning," Astrid said. The council insisted. "Of course they did." Before Connor could protest further, the alcove flared to life. A translucent field enveloped him, projecting a battlefield around his senses. He opened his mouth to complain and found himself shouting instead. "Flank left! No, not like that! You'll overextend!" The words startled him as much as anyone. The simulation adjusted instantly, responding to his commands. Connor's body moved without conscious instruction, ducking, turning, issuing orders with sharp precision. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a small, panicked voice was yelling that this was highly unprofessional. The simulation ended abruptly. Silence rushed back in. Connor stood there, breathing hard, hands trembling. "I have never done that," he said. I once failed a zero-gravity orientation course. Astrid studied him, eyes bright and worried. Vareth's instincts were always strongest under stress. Connor laughed weakly. Great. So I'm only competent when I'm terrified. That explains a lot. News spread quickly, which Connor deeply resented. By the time he reached his quarters, he had received 3 messages from military advisors and 1 from a nutrition specialist recommending a diet appropriate for returning champions. He deleted all of them and ordered comfort foods synthesized into something resembling fried starch. If the universe insisted on being absurd, he would at least be well fed. That night the dreams returned. This time they lingered longer. He stood on a bridge, hands resting on a console that felt familiar. Someone beside him, taller, armored, not quite human, waited for his command. Connor felt the weight of thousands of lives balanced on his next words. The responsibility pressed down on him, heavy and terrifying, and yet there was calm beneath it, confidence, belonging. He woke with a laugh caught in his throat. No, he told the empty room. Absolutely not. The next day, Astrid accompanied him to a council briefing, much to his horror. The chamber was vast, voices echoing softly against curved walls. Holographic projections filled the air, showing fleet movements and energy readings that made Connor's skin prickle. These patterns, one of the commanders said, match those recorded during the Cataclysm War. Connor leaned forward before he could stop himself. They're bait, he said. They want you to respond exactly like that. The room went still. Astrid turned slowly to look at him. Connor grimaced. I read a lot of history, he offered. Patterns repeat. The commanders exchanged looks. One smiled, tight and satisfied. Then perhaps you should help us plan our response. Connor glanced at Astrid. She met his gaze, steady and calm, as if anchoring him in place. I'm not Vareth, he said quietly. No, she replied. You are Connor, and right now that may matter more. Outside the chamber, distant engines thrummed as fleets prepared for motion. Connor felt the pull of something old and insistent stirring inside him, not demanding obedience, but offering knowledge. He didn't know yet whether he would accept it. He only knew that the universe had stopped ignoring him, and it had a very long memory. Connor decided that if he was going to be treated like a returning war legend, he should at least be allowed to complain about it loudly. Unfortunately, the Veltiri had a cultural preference for quiet reverence, which made complaining feel disrespectful, sacrilegious, and somehow still ineffective. He compromised by complaining internally while smiling politely, a skill he was rapidly mastering. The council assigned him a liaison, which sounded harmless until it turned out to be a retired tactician who spoke exclusively in aphorisms. The man followed Connor through the archive for half a cycle, nodding approvingly every time Connor paused to think, as if contemplation itself were proof of destiny. Eventually, Connor stopped near a shelf of inert data crystals and turned around. You know, he said, I was hoping my 30s would involve fewer prophecies and more naps. The tactician smiled serenely. Great leaders are rarely rested. Connor sighed. That explains why they're always so grumpy. Astrid rescued him before the conversation could become philosophical combat. She dismissed the tactician with a single look and guided Connor into a quieter wing of the archive, one reserved for materials deemed too emotionally volatile for casual study. The lights here were dimmer, softer, responding slowly as if thinking things over before committing. You are becoming a symbol, Astrid said. I'd rather become lunch, Connor replied. At least lunch is temporary. She laughed, then grew serious. The council believes pressure will awaken what lies dormant. And I believe pressure makes things explode, Connor said, usually at inconvenient times. They stopped before a sealed chamber. Astrid hesitated, then placed her palm against the lock. It recognized her instantly, unfolding like a living thing. Inside, a single projection node hovered in the air, humming with contained energy. This holds Vareth's final battle records, she said. Unedited, untaught, dangerous. Connor crossed his arms. You're really bad at selling things. She met his eyes. I will stay with you. That mattered more than he wanted to admit. The projection activated, flooding the chamber with motion and sound. Connor felt it before he understood it. The sense of scale, the overwhelming complexity of conflict stretching across space. Fleets maneuvered like living organisms, reacting, adapting. And there he was again, not quite him, not quite someone else, issuing commands with clarity that felt borrowed and yet deeply personal. This time Connor didn't fight it. He watched, heart pounding, as the memories unfolded. He saw Vareth hesitate, argue, joke grimly with subordinates moments before disaster. He felt exhaustion layered beneath resolve, and threaded through it all was something Connor hadn't expected. Doubt. The projection ended. Connor sank onto the floor, laughing breathlessly. "That's it," he said. "I'm officially haunted by a tactically gifted ghost with imposter syndrome." Astrid sat beside him, close enough that he could feel her presence grounding him. "Varath questioned himself constantly," she said. "It was one of his strengths." Connor rubbed his face. "Fantastic. Even my past life had anxiety." Over the next days, the line between Connor and Vareth blurred in small, unsettling ways. Connor found himself correcting star charts without thinking, anticipating system failures moments before alarms triggered. He also found himself tripping over furniture, burning his recaf, and forgetting passwords. The universe, it seemed, was committed to balance. The dreams intensified but changed in tone. They were no longer just battles. There were quiet moments too, standing on observation decks, watching stars drift by, feeling the weight of command and the loneliness that came with it. Connor woke from these dreams not panicked but thoughtful. One evening, while reviewing sensor data with Astrid, he caught himself finishing her sentences. He stopped mid-word, staring at her. "I swear," he said, "if I start predicting your favorite foods, I'm filing a formal complaint with reality." She smiled softly. "You already know I dislike overly sweet things." Connor blinked. "Okay, but that's just common sense." A message interrupted them, sharp and urgent. Long-range sensors had detected movement, ships entering the outer system with energy signatures eerily similar to those recorded during the Cataclysm War. The room filled with tension, so thick Connor felt like he could lean against it. He surprised himself by standing straighter. "They're probing," he said, "testing response times." Astrid watched him carefully. "How do you know?" Connor considered the question, then shrugged. "Because that's what I would do." The realization settled between them, heavy but not crushing. Connor felt fear, yes, but also a strange steadiness, as if something inside him had been waiting for this moment without knowing why. Later, alone in his quarters, Connor stared at his reflection. He still looked like himself, slightly rumpled, dark circles under his eyes, expression perpetually skeptical. But when he raised his hand, there was confidence in the motion he didn't remember earning. "I'm still me," he told the reflection. "You hear that? You don't get to overwrite me." The reflection didn't argue. It simply looked back, patient, as if it knew something Connor was only beginning to understand. Outside, the stars shifted as fleets moved into position. Inside, Connor stood at the edge of two lives, armed with memories he never asked for, in choices he could no longer avoid. And despite everything, prophecies, wars, ancient expectations, he found himself smiling faintly, because if the universe insisted on making him a legend, it was going to have to do it on his terms. Connor learned very quickly that legends were inconveniently popular. He could no longer walk through the archive without people stopping, staring, or bowing slightly in that careful Veltiri way that managed to be respectful and deeply awkward at the same time. Someone had even started leaving small offerings near his workstation, polished stones, data crystals, once an aggressively ugly metal flower. Connor stared at the pile and wondered if reincarnated commanders were allowed to file complaints about clutter. The council wasted no time escalating matters. He was summoned again, this time not as an archivist who had accidentally offended destiny, but as a potential strategic asset. The chamber felt different now. War projections dominated the air, red and blue vectors intersecting like arguments that refused to end politely. Astrid stood beside him, her presence steady, her long ears angled slightly back, a sign he had learned meant restraint. "We require your insight," one of the commanders said. "The enemy's maneuvers mirror those recorded under Vareth's command era." Connor raised a hand. "Just to clarify," he said, "you're asking me, A man who owns 3 identical jackets because decision-making is exhausting, to advise on an interstellar conflict. There was a pause. Astrid coughed softly, hiding a smile. You have already done so, the commander replied. Accurately. Connor leaned closer to the projection, studying the shifting formations. Something inside him stirred. Not overwhelming, not dramatic, but persistent, like a memory knocking politely. He traced a path through the hologram without thinking. The simulation adjusted. Enemy vectors stalling, faltering. That corridor is unstable, Connor said. They'll lose cohesion if you don't chase them. Let them think you will. Silence followed, then quiet approval. Connor exhaled. I hate that I'm right. The pressure intensified after that. He was escorted, politely, firmly, to strategy sessions, simulations, and briefings that stretched long into the cycle. Each time his instincts sharpened. Each time he resisted leaning into them too deeply, afraid that if he did, he wouldn't know where Connor ended and Vareth began. Astrid noticed. She always noticed. She cornered him one evening in a quiet observation corridor, stars drifting beyond the transparent alloy like scattered thoughts. You are holding back, she said. I prefer the term maintaining personal boundaries, Connor replied, with my own potential past selves. You are afraid, she said gently. Connor snorted. I catalog cursed relics for a living. Fear and I are on a first-name basis. She stepped closer. You fear losing yourself. That landed uncomfortably close to the truth. Connor leaned against the railing, staring out at the void. Everyone keeps telling me what I was, he said. No one asks what I want to be. Astrid was quiet for a moment. What do you want? Connor considered it. The answer surprised him. I want to choose, he said, even if the choice is wrong. Astrid nodded. Then choose. The choice came sooner than expected. Alarms rippled through the station, sharp, urgent. Enemy ships breached the outer defensive perimeter, moving faster than predicted. Chaos bloomed in controlled bursts, officers shouting, systems flaring. Connor found himself running, heart pounding, mind frighteningly clear. He reached the command deck without remembering how he got there. The moment he stepped inside, conversations faltered. All eyes turned to him. Don't look at me like that, Connor said. It makes this worse. The tactical display flickered. Enemy formations twisted, adaptive, clever. Connor felt that old, unwelcome familiarity settle into place. He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. They're not attacking the station, he said. They're hurting us. A commander frowned. Toward what? Connor smiled grimly. Toward panic. He began issuing suggestions. Not orders, never orders. Reroute energy. Delay launches. Faint weakness. The responses came back positive, effective. The enemy hesitated. The pattern broke. When the immediate threat receded, the room exhaled collectively. Connor realized his hands were shaking. Astrid was there instantly, grounding him with a light touch to his arm. You did well, she said. I didn't explode, Connor replied. We're setting new standards. Later, alone again, Connor sat in his quarters, staring at the quiet wall. He felt fuller somehow, heavier but not crushed. The memories were still there, waiting, but they hadn't swallowed him. Okay, he murmured to the empty room. We can coexist, but I'm driving. The stars outside shifted as fleets repositioned, the ancient enemy retreating, for now. History watched, attentive and curious. Connor, once ignored, now stood firmly in its line of sight, determined not to be rewritten, but to be expanded. Connor discovered that simulations were far more judgmental than people. People watched politely when he hesitated, offered encouragement when he faltered, and pretended not to notice when he muttered to himself. Simulations, on the other hand, responded to uncertainty by escalating catastrophically. They did not care about his feelings, his identity crisis, or his preference for low-stakes problem-solving. They simply broke things until someone fixed them. The council decided very calmly, very reasonably, that the only way forward was to place Connor in a deep-state tactical simulation modeled after the final phase of the Cataclysm War. They assured him it was purely informational. Connor noted that purely informational was also how people described haunted houses and experimental cuisine. Astrid accompanied him to the simulation chamber, which was larger than the others and disturbingly eager. Its surface shimmered with adaptive light, the air faintly charged. Connor paused at the threshold. "If I come out speaking in an ancient dialect and demanding a fleet," he said, "please stop me." Astrid smiled. "I promise to remind you who you are." "That's comforting," he replied, in a deeply alarming way. The chamber sealed. The world dissolved. Connor stood on a command platform overlooking a vast battlefield, stars fractured by weapons fire. This time the sensation was different. The memories didn't crash into him. They waited. He felt them like tools laid out on a table, available but not imposed. He took a breath. "All right," he said aloud. "We're doing this together, apparently." The simulation surged. Enemy vectors appeared. Familiar now, uncomfortably so. Connor felt the pull of instinct, sharper than before, but he resisted letting it take control. Instead, he asked questions. Why here? Why now? What were they assuming he would do? The answers surfaced slowly, threaded through old experience and new reasoning. Connor adjusted parameters, rerouted defenses, deliberately made a mistake. The enemy reacted exactly as expected. "Oh," he murmured, "you're predictable." He moved faster then, confidence blooming not from memory alone, but from understanding. The battle unfolded differently this time, cleaner, smarter. When the simulation ended, the chamber dimmed, lights softening as if relieved. Connor sagged back against the wall, laughing quietly. "I did it," he said. "I didn't become someone else." Astrid was there immediately, eyes bright. "You led without surrendering yourself." Connor wiped his face. "I'm putting that on a plaque." The council's reaction was enthusiastic in the way only people on the brink of disaster could be. Plans shifted, roles adjusted. Connor found himself assigned an advisory position that suspiciously resembled command without the title. He argued. They compromised by calling it strategic consultation, which felt like lying to everyone involved but sounded nicer. As the external threat intensified, real engagements replaced simulations. Connor watched fleets move in response to his recommendations, felt the weight of consequence settle deeper. He coped by making jokes at inappropriate moments and refusing ceremonial clothing on principle. "I draw the line at capes," he told Astrid as an attendant tried to drape one over his shoulders. "They're a tripping hazard." Astrid laughed. "Vareth wore one." "That explains the dramatic disappearance," Connor said. Between briefings and alerts, quieter moments emerged. Astrid joined him often, sometimes to talk, sometimes simply to sit. In those silences, Connor felt the strange duality within him settle. Not a conflict anymore, but a conversation. Memories surfaced when useful, retreated when not. He learned to listen without obeying. One night the dream shifted again. No battle this time. He stood in a garden he didn't recognize. Stars overhead unfamiliar. Varath was there, not as a mirror, but as a presence, watching him with tired amusement. "You're doing it wrong," the memory said. Connor crossed his arms. "That's my favorite way to do things." The presence smiled, then faded, leaving behind a sense of approval Connor hadn't known he needed. The next engagement was brutal. The enemy adapted faster, striking with precision that mirrored Connor's own tactics. Losses mounted. Fear pressed in. Connor felt the old instinct surge, demanding full control. He closed his eyes. "No," he whispered. "We negotiate." He changed approach, abandoning patterns both he and Vareth favored. The enemy hesitated, thrown off by unpredictability. The window was small but enough. The fleet stabilized. The line held. Afterward, Connor sat alone, hands shaking. Astrid found him there, exhaustion lining her face. "You saved many lives," she said. "So did everyone else," Connor replied. "I just rearranged the chaos." She touched his shoulder lightly. "You are not losing yourself." Connor looked up at her, meeting her steady gaze. "I know," he said, and for the first time he truly believed it. Outside, the war pressed on, ancient and relentless. Inside, Connor felt something settle into place, not destiny, not reincarnation, but purpose chosen rather than inherited. The legend of Vareth lingered, No longer a shadow, but a foundation. And Connor, archivist turned unwilling strategist, stood ready to write something new atop it, one imperfect decision at a time. By the time the war stopped pretending to be distant, Connor had learned an important truth. Nothing made people believe in destiny faster than fear combined with a convenient name from a history book. His name. He heard it whispered in corridors, spoken carefully in briefings, occasionally shouted with a tone that suggested it should come with background music. He responded to all of it with the same strategy, pretend he hadn't noticed, and keep making jokes until everyone remembered he was, unfortunately for prophecy, still himself. The sixth cycle of sustained conflict began badly. Enemy forces no longer tested defenses. They cut through them with intent. Entire sectors went dark, communication relays blinking out like dying stars. Connor stood on the command deck, staring at a tactical projection that refused to simplify itself. Astrid was beside him, her expression calm but tight, long ears angled sharply back. He had learned that meant worry deep enough to be disciplined. "They've changed doctrine," Connor said, "not just adapting, abandoning old logic entirely." A commander frowned. "That is impossible. Their previous strategies were designed to fight Verath," Connor cut in gently. "Whoever this is now, they're fighting me." The room went quiet. Connor immediately regretted saying that out loud. "I don't mean, well, I do mean, but not in the dramatic sense. Please don't carve that into anything." The enemy strike came moments later, a coordinated assault on 3 systems at once, designed to overwhelm response times. Alarms screamed. Officers moved with controlled urgency. Connor felt the familiar pressure building behind his eyes, the old instinct urging him to seize control completely, to stop thinking and start commanding. He didn't. Instead, he sat down. The chair creaked. Several people stared. "Connor?" Astrid asked carefully. "If I stand up," he said, "I'm going to turn into someone everyone expects me to be, and I don't trust that guy anymore." He inhaled slowly, forcing the noise of the room into the background. He thought not like a commander reborn, but like an archivist. He looked for context for what was missing, for what history hadn't bothered to emphasize. "They're spreading us thin," he said, "not to win everywhere, to make us choose wrong." A strategist leaned forward. "Then where do we reinforce?" Connor smiled faintly. "Nowhere. We withdraw." Shock rippled through the room. "We pull back," Connor continued, "from the places that matter least symbolically. Let them take ground that doesn't feed their objective. We deny them the fight they prepared for." Astrid studied the projections, then nodded slowly. "They are chasing a ghost," she said. "If we remove it, they stumble," Connor finished, "because they're still reading the wrong book." Orders were issued, fleets repositioned. The enemy advanced into empty victories, overextending, exposing supply lines Connor hadn't known he knew how to see until now. The counterstrike was swift and precise. Not devastating, but disruptive enough to matter. When the dust settled, Connor realized his hands weren't shaking. That scared him more than anything else. Later he found Astrid alone in the observation ring, watching distant stars flicker as ships jumped in and out of real space. He joined her, leaning on the railing. "I didn't feel it," he said. "Feel what?" "The pull," he replied. "The voice, the weight. I didn't need it." Astrid turned to him, searching his face. "That is not loss," she said softly. "That is growth." Connor snorted. "I preferred the part where growth didn't involve interstellar warfare." She smiled, then sobered. "The council grows impatient. They wish to name you formally, a title, a rank." Connor groaned. "If it comes with a uniform, I'm defecting." "It would come with expectations," Astrid said. "That's worse." The next engagement forced the issue. A direct confrontation. Enemy forces committed fully, abandoning subtlety. The battlefield unfolded in chaotic layers. Physics bent by exotic weapons, space itself folding under strain. Connor stood at the center of it, issuing calm, measured instructions, threading fleets through impossible corridors. Someone shouted, "Commander!" Connor flinched. "No!" The hesitation cost them. A wing broke formation. Casualties mounted. Connor closed his eyes for half a second. Just half. Fine, he muttered, but only temporarily. When he opened them, the world sharpened. He didn't disappear into Varath. He invited him in, selectively, like consulting a very old, very competent colleague he didn't entirely trust. Commands flowed. The battle shifted. The enemy faltered, then fractured. Victory came not with celebration, but with exhausted relief. Afterward, alone in the quiet of his quarters, Connor stared at his reflection again. He looked the same, tired, human, slightly annoyed. "I used you," he said to the memory he could feel but not see. "I didn't become you." There was no answer, only a sense of approval, distant and content. The council's offer arrived that night. Formal recognition, command authority, a place in history restored. Connor declined. Astrid delivered the message herself, standing before them with calm resolve. "He will serve," she said, "but not as a relic reborn. He will serve as Connor." The war was not over, but something had shifted, not just in strategy or leadership, but in belief. Legends, it seemed, could be wrong about themselves, and sometimes the universe needed not a hero returned, but a man stubborn enough to refuse being rewritten while still saving it anyway. The war ended without ceremony, which Connor thought was appropriate. There were no final speeches carved into stone, no dramatic last stand framed against a dying star. Instead, there was a quiet sequence of confirmations, blinking indicators turning from red to neutral, enemy signatures vanishing not in explosion, but in retreat. The universe, it seemed, had grown tired of proving a point. Connor was in the archive when the final message arrived. He had returned there instinctively, as if the shelves and humming containment fields could remind him who he had been before history decided to involve him personally. He was cataloging a fractured navigation core, carefully, methodically, when his wrist implant pulsed. Astrid found him there minutes later. She did not speak at first. She simply stood beside him, long ears relaxed, posture unguarded in a way that told him everything before words could. "It's over," he said. "Yes," she replied. "They have withdrawn beyond the spiral threshold. No pursuit, no conditions." Connor exhaled slowly, then looked down at the navigation core in his hands. "Rude of them," he said, "leaving before I could properly complain." Astrid laughed, the sound softer than it had been in weeks. "You have complained enough for several lifetimes." "Multi-talented," he said. "It's a gift." They walked together through the archive, past relics that no longer felt like warnings. Connor noticed how different the space felt now. Quieter, lighter, as if the past had finally loosened its grip, satisfied that it had been acknowledged. The Codex of Champions rested where it always had, dormant and closed. Connor paused before it, eyeing the cover suspiciously. "You're not opening that," he said to Astrid. "I wasn't planning to." "Good. We've had enough revelations for one existence." He reached out anyway, resting his palm lightly on the surface. The codex remained inert. No glow, no hum, no insistence. Connor smiled. "Looks like it's done with me." Astrid tilted her head. "Or perhaps it trusts you now." He withdrew his hand. "Let's not get sentimental. It's still a book." The council convened one final time, not to command, but to conclude. Connor attended reluctantly, standing at the edge of the chamber rather than its center. Titles were offered again, more gently this time. Honors, positions, a permanent place among Velthiri leadership. Connor listened politely, then cleared his throat. "I appreciate the enthusiasm," he said. "Truly, but I already have a job." A murmur rippled through the chamber. "I catalog things," he continued. "I preserve context. I ask inconvenient questions about why artifacts exist instead of what they can do. Turns out that skill is surprisingly useful in a crisis." One of the commanders studied him. "You would return to the archive?" Connor nodded. "Someone has to make sure the next war doesn't get misfiled." Astrid spoke then, her voice steady. "Connor has served not as Vareth reborn, but as something rarer, a bridge between memory and choice." The council accepted this, slowly, thoughtfully. History, after all, respected endings that made sense. In the days that followed, Connor noticed the change most in himself. The dreams faded, not gone, but distant, like old recordings archived properly at last. The instincts remained, but quieter, cooperative rather than demanding. He could feel Vareth as a presence no longer leaning over his shoulder, but standing back, watching with what felt like approval. One evening, Connor and Astrid stood on the observation deck, watching ships depart. Some returning home, others venturing outward into uncertain peace. "So," Connor said, "what happens to the princess now that the prophecy didn't end dramatically?" Astrid smiled. "She continues governing, negotiating, repairing. Less exciting, perhaps. Sounds exhausting." "It is," she admitted, "but it is chosen." Connor nodded. "I'm starting to think that's the important part." She looked at him then, really looked, as if confirming something for herself. "You are no longer afraid," she said. Connor considered that. "I wouldn't go that far," he said, "but I'm not confused anymore." The archive welcomed him back without comment, which he appreciated. The offerings disappeared. The whispers faded. Connor returned to his desk, reorganized it meticulously, and resumed cataloging with a strange sense of satisfaction. He had not escaped history. He had negotiated with it. Weeks later, he added a new entry to the archive. Not a weapon, not a relic, a record. The Cataclysm War, the Resurgence, the Resolution, documented with careful neutrality and an emphasis on human error, adaptability, and the dangers of assuming the past would repeat itself exactly. He signed it simply. Connor. No titles, no epithets. When he finished, he leaned back, stretching. "That," he said to no one in particular, "is staying filed." Somewhere deep within the archive, the Codex of Champions remained silent. And for the first time in centuries, that silence felt like peace.